In one of Trent's debates a while back, the atheist had that twist on the problem of evil regarding animal suffering.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to hear a more in-depth breakdown of that argument. I'll admit that I don't think the normal response to the problem of evil does a good job covering that of animal suffering.
Well, I mean, the idea of the problem of evil is that there's things in the world we wouldn't expect. And I'm interested to see how you handle... Do you cover evil a bit in your book?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like evil and suffering is at first what we wouldn't expect if God existed. And the question is, how do we reconcile that? And so we see some evils and it's like, oh, like if humans commit evil, we can see a good reason God has for it, like to give us free will. And I think the complaint is, all right, but what are the good reasons for animal suffering? Like it's not for animals to have free will because they don't have free will like humans. So some of the responses for some evils, I agree, like the good reasons God would have to justify some evils, there's going to be a multitude of reasons. In fact, you don't have to give specific reasons. You can just say, look, God's all powerful and all knowing. Why should I think he lacks those reasons? But yeah, with animal suffering, I think that you can provide a wide variety of reasons as to why God would do that. Like that animal suffering is just a necessary consequence of creating a material world where, that's Aquinas's answer, where, you know, the lion gets more perfect as the zebra gets less perfect when they're eaten. And that things like animal pain, well, why can't God just make animals that don't feel pain? And I would say, would they be animals? They'd seem more like how would they know to respond to danger in the natural world? Like how would they know to eat when they're hungry? How would they know to run away if they're on fire? You know, they touch something hot or like something's biting them. If God just programs their brains to always act in a survival manner, but not in response to stimuli, they'd be more like furry robots than the goodness of animals. So there's a lot that would go in there. And I've also explored the possibility that animals, one, well, if they don't have conscious awareness of their own pain, it's not as much of a problem. And two, if animals do have conscious awareness and they're suffering, maybe it's possible that God will compensate animals in the afterlife by resurrecting them, not with, by just reconstituting them. And that's something that some theologians have explored.
I think the problem of animal suffering is actually one of the toughest ones for us to respond to because as Trent pointed out, the traditional theodicies or responses to the problem of evil don't always apply to the same degree. In some cases, they don't apply at all to the animal realm because animals are before the human fall. And so I think C.S. Lewis's chapter on this is still helpful in The Problem of Pain, chapter 9 on animal pain. I take a little different approach. I think the thing that is so hard is people can always just say, look, in heaven, on the new earth, God is going to make a perfect world that doesn't have a crocodile eating a gazelle in which the gazelle slowly, agonizingly dies or something like that. And so the person can always ask the question, why didn't God set it up like that to begin with?
Right.
That's my concern with the limitation of appealing to kind of natural laws. My approach is kind of, I wrote an article many years ago saying the satanic fall may have influenced the natural order. And that's the approach I take, which is kind of, as crazy as that seems, some really smart people have believed that. Well,
Catholic theologians,
I'll just give a few examples. Catholic theologians, Hans Urs von Balthasar, one of the greatest Catholic theologians of the 20th century, he advocated for that. Alvin Plantinga, one of the greatest Christian philosophers, advocated for that. C.S. Lewis. Tolkien's The Silmarillion basically envisions that. That's the story. It's the evil angels fighting with the good angels, and that affects nature. So that's not my argument in actual apologetics with a skeptic, because it's not going to gain much ground.
Have you read Tolkien?
Do you believe in Satan? Yeah. But as a Christian, I actually think that there's at least a possibility there.
Sure. Speaking of Thomas, he says that the herbivores wouldn't have become carnivores because of the fall, that they were carnivores prior to it.
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah, no.
So it wasn't the fall that affected animals.
He believed that they retained their carnivorous and predators existed prior to the fall, was his view.
Can I ask a question about that then? So this has always been my biggest problem with theistic evolution, is that it seems that it has to allow for pain prior to the fall, like animal pain prior to the fall.
It is interesting that Thomas
is there an explanation for that?
Yeah.
Because I just can't get over that.
What Thursday's asking about is my personal greatest intellectual struggle in my journey of faith, of just this process by which we all came about seems so brutal, so clumsy. It's pain.
Are you talking about evolution?
Yeah, the whole yes. But even if you don't have evolution, so I just say the problem of pre-human natural evil. Because even if you're just an old Earth creationist, same problem. You've got death, disease, pain, and apparent futility. And there's one quote from a skeptic who says any 3-year-old can see this whole process of reproducing and killing by the trillions is not an efficient way to create. So, but I think there are some responses, and that response about the satanic fall at least gives you some conceptual space to say this. You don't necessarily have to say this is exactly how God set up the world. You can't, because we all believe there's been another fall before the human fall. We all think evil began before human beings. And so that at least gives you that conceptual space for a kind of fallenness theodicy for pre-human natural evil. There's more to talk about with this. We'll talk more.
Yeah, I think your concern there would be 2 arguments about pain before the fall of man and death. What I would say is that Scripture teaches that human death came into existence at the fall, not necessarily death itself. So I don't see a contradiction there in Revelation. The concern would just be, would God have a good reason for allowing animal suffering to exist for, well, I guess if you're an old Earth creationist, it's tens of thousands of years. If you're a theistic evolutionist, hundreds of millions of years. Would God have a good reason for allowing that to take place? And that's something I've engaged in other work, and I hope to engage at a greater length in my next book.
Just real quick, I want to point people to Kyle Keltzer's book, Thomism and the Problem of Animal Suffering. I've had him on the show before, and I enjoy what he had to say. Thank you so much for watching. Please do me a favor and like. And if you loved, subscribe. And if you just cannot get enough, mattfradd.locals.com.